I sold my company for $23 million. I was supposed to feel proud, accomplished, free. Instead, I was moments away from being murdered by family. At my retirement party, while laughter echoed through my home, I watched my daughter-in-law pull a tiny vial from her purse and tip something into my champagne glass, the one with the chipped rim I always used. She smiled, handed it to me with care, and said, "You deserve it." I smiled back. Then, when no one was looking, I quietly switched glasses with her own mother. Within minutes, the woman collapsed at my feet, convulsing, and all I could think was, she missed. But not for long. I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reaches. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. If this story moves you, or if you believe stories like mine deserve to be heard, please consider subscribing. I'm Marin Whitmore. And sometimes surviving your own family is the hardest thing a woman can do. I sold my company for $23 million. 32 years of building, sacrificing, clawing my way through rooms full of men who never expected me to last past lunch, ended in a wire transfer and a few digital signatures. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt hollow. I stood at the edge of my backyard in Carmel by the sea, watching fairy lights shimmer above linen-covered tables and well-dressed guests clinking glasses, and I felt nothing. Cassian had begged me to throw this party. "You deserve to be celebrated, Mom." He said it like a duty, not a desire. He always had that tone when he needed something from me. And lately, Cassian always needed something. My once brilliant, promising son, who used to build entire worlds out of Legos in our living room, had grown into a man whose dreams outpaced his discipline. He blamed the market. He blamed the banks. He blamed me. But he never blamed himself. And Delilah, his wife, oh, Delilah. Beautiful, curated, and poisonous in the way only something sugar-sweet can be. She owned a boutique jewelry brand that bled money but looked fabulous on Instagram. She never failed to call me Mom with a smile so wide I could hear it even when she texted. She was hosting this party. She'd insisted. "You shouldn't have to lift a finger," she said, and I hadn't. Not even to object, which in hindsight was mistake number one. The party was lovely. I'll give her that. Soft jazz in the background, flickering candlelight under glass domes, rosemary sprigs on every napkin. Guests laughed and toasted. My name floated in the air like confetti, but something in me itched. I spotted the champagne flutes lined up neatly on the drinks table. All of them looked identical except one. My glass. The one with a faint chip on the rim, barely visible unless you knew where to look. The one I always used more from habit than sentiment, but still. That glass had been with me through anniversaries, deals, funerals. It was a small detail, but I noticed when details changed. Delilah stood at the table, her back to me. Her right hand dipped into her purse and emerged holding a tiny glass bottle clear with a metal twist cap. Her movements were efficient, practiced. She scanned the crowd, leaned in slightly, and tipped the contents into the chipped glass. Her wrist trembled just slightly. She capped the bottle, tucked it away, then turned, smoothing her expression into something effortless. She didn't see me watching. I didn't react, didn't gasp, didn't scream. I walked toward her, toward my glass, toward the smile she painted across her face as she lifted it and offered it to me. "You deserve it," she said. I took the glass. I smiled. I held onto it through 2 speeches, 3 photos, and 1 fake compliment from the wife of an old investor. Then as Delilah turned away to adjust something near the cake, I walked slowly across the patio and placed the glass down right next to another. A different hand picked it up. I didn't stop her. I didn't say a word. 50 years in corporate war rooms had taught me that if you want to catch a snake, you let it believe it bit the mouse. Marcy Flynn loved champagne, not in moderation, not as a social grace. She adored it. Cold, crisp, and served in fragile flutes. Delilah's mother was exactly the type of woman who would reach for a half-full glass if no one stopped her, and I didn't stop her. I watched as she took a sip, smiled faintly, and nodded to herself. "Is this the Veuve?" she asked a guest beside her. "It tastes different, a little metallic." She didn't wait for an answer, just kept sipping. My stomach coiled, but I kept smiling. 10 minutes passed. The speeches started. Someone toasted to powerful women and the empires they build. I half-listened, eyes tracking Marcy, as she blinked slowly, pressed a hand to her temple, then tried to stand. She stumbled. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came out. Then her legs buckled. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the stone patio. Her body followed. Convulsions hit fast, violent, jarring, unmistakable. Foam collected at the corners of her mouth. Gasps, screams, chairs scraping. Someone shouted for help. I heard Delilah scream. It had the cadence of horror, but not the heart. I didn't move right away. I wanted to see her face. Cassian stood frozen phone in hand, fumbling for 911. Delilah dropped beside her mother, wailing, "Mom! Mom!" She clutched her, shook her gently, then harder. "Somebody do something." I walked over slowly, knelt beside them. The paramedics were minutes away. I could already hear sirens in the distance. I saw the empty champagne flute on the ground shattered into 6 jagged pieces. Beside it, Marcy's purse lay open. Her perfume bottle had rolled out. The scent of roses and something chemical filled the air. Then I caught it, that faint bitter smell. Almond, oleander. I'd once taken a forensics seminar in my 20s when I briefly considered law school. Some smells don't leave you. They worked on Marcy in the ambulance. Delilah rode with her. Cassian offered to stay with me. I told him I was fine. He looked at me. Just looked. His mouth opened, but he said nothing. The party dissolved like fog. Later that evening, Delilah returned. Her mascara had streaked her voice hoarse. "They think it might have been something she ate," she said, grabbing my wrist tightly. "Do you think it was the food or the drinks?" Her voice cracked on the word drinks. I smiled softly. "I'm sure the doctors will figure it out." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Yeah, they will. She's strong." I nodded, letting her feel whatever false comfort she needed. Delilah didn't know that I had seen everything. Every flick of her hand, every glance over her shoulder, every lie. She thought she'd buried the evidence. She thought she missed her target. She was right. She had. But I also knew this wasn't over. What happened tonight wasn't a failure. It was a test run. And next time, they wouldn't leave room for mistakes. That night, after the party had emptied out and the air smelled like wilted roses and burnt citronella, I sat in my study, turned off the lights, and opened my ledger. Not the digital files, not the shared spreadsheets Cassian had access to. My real ledger, the one I kept in ink, the one they didn't know existed. Page after page, line after line. 5 years of helping them. 1,000 here, 10,000 there. A silent investment in Cassian's startup that never launched. A loan to cover Delilah's unexpected tax issue. A down payment for their second car when they just needed one good family road trip. I totaled it up, $196,428. I remembered every check I'd written, every lie I'd nodded through, every moment I'd told myself, they're young. They'll learn. This is what family does. But as I stared at that number bold and final in my own handwriting, I realized what it actually was. Not support, not love. It was leverage, and it had bought me exactly nothing. They lived in a 5-bedroom colonial in Palo Alto with quartz counters and smart mirrors. Their driveway held a black Jaguar and a silver BMW. Delilah ran her luxury boutique where nobody ever seemed to carry shopping bags out the door. Every time I asked how things were going, she'd smile and say, "We're getting there." Apparently, there was foreclosure. I needed facts, not feelings. So the next morning, I called Jenna Brooks. She'd been head of internal security for Axion Bio before retiring early. Sharp eyes, sharper instincts. She once caught an embezzlement ring by tracing the pattern of someone's lunch orders. I told her what I needed. I want everything you can dig up, quietly. Within 72 hours, she delivered in 48. The report sat on my kitchen island, bound in soft leather pages, tabbed and numbered. It began with Cassian. Their house was on a second mortgage, maxed. Credit card debt, $79,000 and change. Student loans in default. An IRS lien from 2 years ago quietly resolved with money I'd sent for their anniversary. But then came the line that caught my breath. A life insurance policy, $500,000. On me. Taken out 3 months ago. Beneficiary Delilah Flynn. I stared at the document. The signature was mine. Forged, but almost perfect. The insurance company wouldn't know unless someone forced them to check. And why would they? Healthy, retired woman. Accidental death. Payout in weeks. I suddenly saw it all, the carefully drawn script in Delilah's notebook, brain bullet-pointed and timed to the second. A slow, steady decline. Confusion, fatigue, one accidental fall in the tub, a stroke, heart failure, natural causes. She wouldn't even need to hide the body, just make sure I didn't wake up. And Cassian, what had he known? Everything. The night I watched Marcy collapse, I thought I'd seen cruelty. Now I realized it was just logistics, a rehearsal. I picked up the phone and dialed Dean Wallace. He answered with his usual cheer until he heard my voice. "Dean," I said, "I'm rewriting my will." A pause. "Okay, what's the urgency? I want everything changed. All of it. And I need the new version ready before Sunday." Another pause. "Then, are you in danger?" I smiled, staring at the glass of water in my hand. "Let's just say, I plan to outlive some people's expectations." The morning after the call to Dean, I called Cassian. I've been feeling unsettled since the party, I said. After what happened to Marcy, I don't want to be alone right now. He didn't hesitate. "Of course, Mom. You can stay here, as long as you need." Delilah's voice came faintly in the background. "Tell her the guest room's already made. We'd love to have her." Of course they would. By sunset, I was standing in their foyer, suitcase in hand. Jenna had slipped something into the side pocket that morning, a small camera no bigger than a coat button already synced to my phone. I sewed it into the collar of my silk nightgown, just in case. Delilah greeted me like a Southern bride on a holiday card. "You look tired. Let me fix you something comforting." She brought me a warm glass of milk scented with vanilla. Her voice was a lullaby. Sleep is the best medicine. I took the glass, smiled, took a sip just enough to wet my lips. Then once the bedroom door clicked shut, I walked into their guest bathroom and poured the rest into the pot of a cactus plant. Oleander had a sweet smell, too. The room was decorated in soft neutrals, with a cashmere throw and scented candles. Too much care, too much quiet. I brushed my teeth, turned down the lights, lay in bed, and waited. Around midnight, I heard footsteps, soft, padded, careful, then voices muffled but close. Through the inch of space under the door, I heard Cassian whisper, "Are you sure? What if it doesn't work?" Delilah snapped back, her voice sharp, even at a whisper. If she doesn't go fully under, she'll at least be disoriented. That's enough. Enough for what? I held my breath still as stone. Footsteps padded closer. The door creaked. Delilah entered the room, moving like a woman who'd done this before. She walked to the side of the bed, leaned in. I felt her fingers brush my wrist, checking for pulse or skin reaction. I wasn't sure. Then she opened my eye. Just one. I didn't blink. She waited, held her breath, then turned and left. The door closed. The house went still. I waited a full hour before I moved. When I finally sat up, my hands were cold, not from fear, from clarity. The next morning, I was in the kitchen before they were. Coffee brewed. Sunlight poured through the marble countertops. I wore a navy cardigan sleeves, rolled just enough to show I was steady, alive, awake. Cassian walked in, rubbing his neck. "Did you sleep okay?" I turned, handed him a cup. "Oh, I slept fine. But you were tossing all night. Talking in your sleep again." His hands froze mid-stir. I smiled, took a sip of my coffee. It was time for phase 2. I went home the next day with a plan sharper than any blade they might have tucked behind their charming smiles. I called Cassian and told him my hands had been trembling, that my memory felt like it was skipping tracks. "Maybe you're right," I said, voice soft, measured. "It's probably time someone else helped manage things." The pause on the other end of the line was microscopic, but I caught it. Then, "Of course, Mom. We'll come over tomorrow. We can go over the paperwork together." The next afternoon, they arrived looking like saviors. Cassian in a pale blue shirt he always wore when he wanted something. Delilah in pastel cashmere, her lips painted a shade too pink for sincerity. They had folders, pins, smiles. I greeted them with herbal tea and false humility. They laid out the documents one by one, a proposed admission to Sunset Grove, a comfortable retirement facility I'd visited once and hated, a durable power of attorney, an inventory of assets, a medical directive. I didn't even blink. "Just sign here," Mom Cassian said, pointing with the same finger that once clung to mine in a preschool parking lot. "This just gives us the ability to help when things get overwhelming. No pressure," I signed. They watched me like hawks. What they didn't know, couldn't know, was that everything they handed me was a decoy. Dean had crafted them to look authentic. They bore the right stamps, legalese formatting, but none of them held any actual power. The transfer of financial authority gave them access to a dummy account with $1 in it. The hospital admission form listed a fake patient ID. Every page was bait, but the best part wasn't the fake forms. It was the tiny recorder sitting on my mantle. Cassian had poured the tea himself. Delilah had smiled as she said, "Now nothing can stop us from keeping you safe." Her voice was so soft, so maternal, I nearly laughed. The file that recorder captured would be time-stamped, crystal clear admissible. That evening, Jenna texted me an image, a screenshot of Delilah's messages. She'd contacted a Dr. Alan Redgrave scheduling a psychological evaluation for me next week at their home. "Want to make sure she's—" Still sound, Delilah had written. "Might be best to ease her into something full-time." I stared at the text for a long while, not because I was surprised, but because of how rehearsed it all sounded. They'd practiced this narrative, fragile mother concerned children, proactive care. Except this mother had seen sharks circle before. That night, I stood in my bathroom holding the file folder with the forged documents they'd proudly delivered. My reflection stared back, older, sure, but not broken. My late husband once told me, "You never play the last move first." Well, I hadn't, but I'd just set the board, and they'd stepped right into check. 2 mornings later, I had Dean set a meeting at my house. I told Cassian it was about finalizing the paperwork, and he sounded positively buoyant. I didn't tell him who else was coming. When the doorbell rang at 10 a.m., Cassian and Delilah entered looking freshly dry-cleaned and slightly smug. But their smiles dimmed when they saw the others seated in the living room. Jenna Brooks, cross-legged legal pad in hand. Detective Lisa Monroe from the Monterey County Sheriff's Department. Sharp blazer, sharper eyes. Dean poured coffee. "What's going on?" Cassian asked, stiffening. I didn't answer right away. I placed a manila envelope on the coffee table. "Let's begin. Item 1, lab analysis on the champagne bottle from the party. Trace amounts of nerium oleander undetectable, by scent fatal, in the right dosage. Item 2, Life insurance policy documents obtained under my name, forged signature beneficiary listed as Delilah Flynn, the date of purchase. Precisely 5 weeks before the party. Item 3 printed messages from Delilah to Dr. Alan Redgrave. The language was delicate but not subtle. Mental fog, increasing confusion, unsafe alone. Item 4, proof of payment, 2 transfers from Cassian's account to Dr. Redgrave's. One marked as consultation, the other simply, thank you. Item 5, audio recordings. The kitchen, the bedroom hallway. The whispered conversation about if she doesn't go under, at least she'll be confused. The night of the milk and vanilla. Detective Monroe leaned back. This is enough to launch an official investigation into attempted murder, financial fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Cassian paled. Delilah tried to speak, then thought better of it. I looked at Monroe. Not yet, I said. Let them walk. Let them stew. Let them make the next move. Monroe nodded slowly. If that's what you want. But we'll be watching. That night, as the sun dipped below the redwoods, my phone rang. Delilah's voice was syrup again. Me kue kong, I've been so worried. Dr. Redgrave will stop by tomorrow just to check in, nothing scary. He's wonderful. I said I'd be ready. Then added casually, Oh, and Delilah, do you still have that bottle of champagne from the party? I'd love to try it again. It had a unique flavor. There was a long pause. No, I think we finished it. Pity, I replied. By midnight, I'd received 2 new updates. Jenna notified me that Cassian had tried to move funds from one of my Shell accounts, one I'd purposely left unlocked as bait. And Monroe, who'd begun monitoring him with a quiet warrant, had caught him making a frantic call to a broker, trying to sell off shares from a holding company I legally owned. He'd used falsified credentials. Then came the kicker. Dr. Redgrave had already sent a preliminary assessment to Cassian, declaring me mentally impaired, early signs of diminished capacity, based solely on a third-party account. No session, no evaluation, no signature from me. Violation of medical ethics, illegal submission of documentation, and most importantly, confirmation of their scheme. As I stood watching the security feed later that night, I saw them approaching the gate. Cassian held an envelope, Delilah a wrapped box. I could imagine the performance rehearsed inside. But this time I wasn't hoping to catch something. This time I was certain. I invited Cassian and Delilah to my house under the pretense of finalizing the transfer to Sunset Grove. I told them that after Dr. Redgrave's visit, I felt it was time to step back to let them take the reins. Delilah arrived in a flowing white dress, clutching a bouquet of lavender like she was attending a funeral rather than a routine legal appointment. Cassian's face was tense muscles, taut beneath his tailored shirt, but he forced a smile that barely hid his anxiety. I led them into the living room and gestured toward the documents laid neatly on the coffee table. A freshly opened bottle of wine sat beside copies of the asset inventory, the durable power of attorney, and other legal forms. All of these papers looked perfectly legitimate. They had Dean's seals, notarization signatures that seemed official. What they didn't know was that each page was a decoy, a mock-up designed to lure them into thinking they had full control, while every bank account, every financial asset remained untouched. They eagerly signed. Their pens moved across the paper with the satisfaction of hunters who believe they've cornered their prey. I sat across from them, calm and composed my face, a mask of serenity, while a small recorder hidden in my sleeve captured every word. I leaned forward, my voice measured. I have just one final request. Before the accounts are transferred, please sign here, I said, placing another set of documents on the table. A statement confirming that both of you have voluntarily accepted the life insurance and any inheritance rights should anything happen to me. They signed without hesitation. Smiles of triumph spread across their faces. They had no idea that this single signature, approved by Dean, would serve as evidence of their complicity, trapping them in their own scheme. Delilah lifted her glass in celebration, and at that exact moment, the doorbell rang. I raised an eyebrow as Detective Lisa Monroe and a representative from the bank's forensic auditing team stepped inside, badges flashing subtly. The officers carried documentation laptops and an air of authority that immediately shifted the room. The police laid out the evidence. The champagne tested positive for oleander, the insurance contracts, the recorded conversations, from my stay at their house proof of payments to Dr. Redgrave and copies of all financial transactions Cassian and Delilah had attempted. They handed them across the table with precision. I spoke softly, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. "You may sit down. Everything begins now, but not the way you expected." Delilah's hand shook as she slammed her glass to the floor, the wine splashing across the polished wood. Cassian fumbled with his jacket, unable to fasten the buttons in his panic. And when he looked toward me, desperate for any sign of mercy or surprise, I didn't look back. I simply watched. 3 months after the preliminary trial, Delilah was sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder and elder abuse. Cassian received 3 years probation with 12 months of mandatory rehabilitation. I did not request restitution. The loss of freedom they had earned through their choices was more than enough. Marcy Flynn, Delilah's mother, recovered after intensive physical therapy. She sent me a handwritten note. I was a victim of my own child, but at least I survived to apologize. I folded it neatly and placed it beside my ledger. All my assets were now secured under the Whitmore Foundation, established to support older women vulnerable to financial exploitation. I retained just enough for myself to live comfortably, paint, and teach financial literacy workshops for senior women in Monterey. Mina, my granddaughter, called from Brown University. "Grandma, are you sad that you had to fight against Dad?" I smiled, warmth flooding my chest. "Yes, but I do not regret it. And if you live long enough, you'll understand. Loving someone does not mean letting them destroy you." Cassian, in a rare moment of reflection, wrote me a letter from prison. "I didn't realize when concern for you blurred into entitlement. I feared poverty more than I feared guilt." I attended Mina's master's graduation, sitting in the back row unnoticed among proud parents and relatives. She spotted me, ran across the aisle, and hugged me without a word. Some gestures speak louder than explanations. I refused all media interviews but sent a draft of my memoir, Marked Glass, to state libraries. The cover displayed a single champagne glass with a tiny chip, an emblem of caution and survival. I stood in my garden, the roses my late husband planted, flourishing under careful care, holding a cup of tea instead of wine. At my feet, a small rescue dog I had named Justice patted softly. At 68, I had learned that survival did not require forgiveness, and freedom did not demand compromise. I had lived, remembered, and endured. I had prevailed with my mind intact, my memories sharp, and my dignity whole. I could smile because I had survived the ultimate betrayal. And for the first time in decades, the world felt safe in my hands.